call the roll.
Mayor Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kovar.
Here.
Councilmember Duvall.
Present.
Councilmember Costick.
Here.
Councilmember Siemens.
Present.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Searcy. Here.
Great, welcome everyone. Looking at our agenda moving forward, our next meeting will be Wednesday, May 11th here in the auditorium. It starts at 7:30. We have a proclamation for Bike to Work Day, which is on May 20th. Our voting session next Wednesday includes the first reading ordinance adopting our FY 2023 tax rate, adopting the stormwater management budget, and adopting our FY 2023 budget. We also have the second reading ordinance approving FY 2022 budget amendment number 4 and a single reading ordinance approving the purchase of a police vehicle. On Wednesday, May 18th, again, here in the auditorium at 7:30, we have the second reading ordinance on our 2023 tax rate, stormwater management budget, and our 2023 budget. Excuse me, my computer's beeping. Our work sessions that evening will include procurement of closed captioning and other city TV equipment and procurement item on auditing services and preparation of annual comprehensive financial report. Then on Wednesday, May 25th, we have our regular meeting here at 7:30. We have a single reading ordinance awarding a contract for closed captioning and other city TV equipment, and a single reading ordinance approving award of a contract for auditing services and preparation of the annual comprehensive financial report. And that will take us till the end of May, and then it's June already, which is insane. So yeah, and then we'll be in June. There's no changes to our agenda this evening. We will start with public comments in the auditorium. If you have public comments first on voting items, we have our voting items tonight, our first reading ordinance approving FY 2022 budget amendment number 4. Does anyone in the auditorium have any comments on that? Seeing none, does anyone have any comments on the resolution authorizing temporary street closures in support of the 2022 Old Tacoma Business Association event calendar? Okay, seeing none, then we will take general public comments in the auditorium. If you have any comments, please come to the podium, state your name and where you live in the city, and you have 3 minutes.
So I heard my problems and challenges dealing with paying my property tax. No one should have to deal with this. I spent hours. Luckily, I was retired, which is bad because I don't make as much money to pay the taxes. But if I had a regular job, I would have probably been fired because I spent hours during regular work hours trying to settle this business. And finally, I ended up faxing my forms. And they encourage, when you call them, they encourage you to file it online, but most people who are seniors and disabled people, low-income people, don't have computers, and it's difficult. And I try to file it hours on end with online, but I made a mistake and put an X in the wrong box, and I tried to correct it, and then it locked me out and wouldn't let me in at all. It's really a screwed up system that needs to be fixed. And why can't the property tax situation be a lot easier? Why are there 3, county, city, and state? Why can't they all get together on this and just pay? I mean, I don't know. It's just, I'm sorry, it's just frustrating. Thank God they got it. And I have proof that I faxed it to them. And I just want to say that I'm against increasing property taxes because I'm a low-income homeowner. And I can say I've spoken to some of my other neighbors, long-term neighbors. Many of them are Black Americans who moved here when they could afford it. They are really not happy either about this proposed increase. And I spoke to someone about a year ago who was a new, freshly minted Tacoma Park resident. She says, oh, well, I don't like the high taxes, but I should get more bang for my buck for this. But more bang for your buck means higher taxes, and it keeps going on this circle, you know? More services, more taxes, you know? There's some of us that can't afford it, and I think there should be with reparations for Black Americans making less than $60,000 a year. And I think there should be supportive housing and a supportive network for people like my son, because he's in grave danger of leaving his house and not be able to afford to live there anymore, because he needs help. and he was born here. And I'm really angry about this. I mean, why should he leave his home he's lived in all his almost 37 years? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Machui. Any other public comments in the auditorium this evening? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move to public comments online. I believe we have 2 public commenters. I had Ms. Daniela Lusko first. Is she with us, or should I go to Mr. Hubner?
You might start with Mr.
Okay, let's go to Mr. Hubner. Mr. Hubner, you're up first.
Good evening, Paul Hubner, Ward 3. The basic problem with the city budget is not with revenue, but with expenditures. 74% of city revenue is from taxes, and another 15% comes from the county rebate. And there has been a steady tax revenue increase of around $435,000 per year above the previous year for more than 5 years running. Expenditures have surpassed revenue over that same period, in part because of the constant addition of staff positions, many upper-level ones, with seemingly little regard as to how they will be funded. It falls to you, the council, and our new city manager to redirect city expenditures away from the past city culture of bloated bureaucracy and mismanaged capital projects, and chart a new course of fiscal responsibility that the council has already avowed as one of its key priorities. The recent assessment increases, rampant inflation, and the emergency caused by allowing stabilized rents to increase by 7.3% this year means that many residents of Tacoma Park now facing dire consequences. This stabilized rent increase is 4 to 7 times higher than any of the last 7 years. Not stepping up to help our renters would be a lack of fiscal responsibility and moral judgment on the part of the city. This too is a question of how to reallocate our budget, not a question of how much we should increase property taxes. And here's some of the suggestions for cuts to the FY23 budget. Reallocate the approximate $1.2 million of ARPA funds from the police atrium back to rent relief, as so many have advocated for months. Reallocate the proposed $477,000 for police SUVs to rent relief. These 2 reappropriations alone would nearly equal the 7% rent increase for some 6,000 renters for 2 to 3 months in a $1,500 a month apartment, and perhaps 6 months in a negotiated settlement with landlords, and maybe some tax relief in addition. Rescind the use of police vehicles from all but patrol officers. This complies with their collective bargaining agreement, which covers officers, not management or staff. Investigate the transfer of the police dispatch to the county for current savings and to prepare for any patrol officer shortage. This may also help to ameliorate the patrol officer shortage and reduce the approximate $800,000 of annual police overtime. Transfer or eliminate positions from planning to ARPA rent relief. Do not fill the vacant police captain position, a saving of nearly $200,000 a year, including benefits. Cut the conference and training budget. $251,000 seems excessive for a city with only 17,000 residents. Eliminate the hiring of any more consultants without clear identification of a current source of revenue, and require all department heads to identify exactly how they would manage the cuts necessary to achieve the 9% needed to balance the budget this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hubner. Do we have the other public commenter, or? Nope.
I don't see her.
Okay. If she joins us before we get into the voting session, we can bring her on. Now we'll move to council comments. Any council comments this evening? And I think Councilmember Siemens and Smith, you need to raise your hands if that's possible. You want to speak? Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you. My high-tech hand. Yes, I'm sorry to bring this up at this late date, but I just had a phone call from one of the fire victims of the apartment fire at, I think it was 7710 Maple Avenue several months ago. Before our previous housing director had left the city's employment, I checked with him to make sure that we would have a smooth transition of the housing for those tenants, because although the work is being done by the contractors at the building, management has said that their work will not be done before the end of April, and so the tenants were going to need recommitment that their hotel room expenses, the housing expense there would still be partially covered by the city. And Mr. Cross assured me that that was the plan. But now the phone call I got this night from the tenant said that they had contacted the new acting manager and the hotel, and most recently, I won't go into all the detail, but most recently the hotel told them that because they had not received a recommitment from the city for the month of May, that the tenants are going to have to move out on May 10th because they have booked those rooms for other customers. And I'm not sure exactly who, but someone, I guess, has told them that they're going to have to go to a homeless shelter for housing until their apartments are ready. The problem is, I guess they contacted the homeless shelter, and aside from the fact that it's woefully inadequate for families with children, the shelter has told them that because they are not homeless, technically homeless, that their shelter would not be available for them, and that they really did not have any room for the families. And I'm just asking that city manager look into this and let me know how we can come up with a better resolution than telling families that they have to go to a shelter or go out on the street at this point in time. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens. So I would say that it has been a seamless process, and Acting Director Eubanks has been doing a great job in communicating with the families. There's been a lot of communication with the county. I can't speak to the information you shared tonight because that's not the information that I know and have been told. The county has reached out, and Acting Director Eubanks will be having a meeting with all the families. I think it's tomorrow. So he has a meeting with the families tomorrow to share with them the information that he has at this point. The county has stated that they would be putting the families into the hotels that the county has. And I believe it's about 2 or 3 hotels. And so that's where we are. So I don't know anything about putting people out on the streets or the homeless other places that put these individuals. As of right now, we'll have the meeting tomorrow and then connect them with the contact that the county has in their housing department to be able to put the individuals into the county approved hotels.
I thank you, Mr. Fox, for that information. It's reassuring. I was only relaying to you information that I received just minutes ago over the phone from one of the tenants. And if nothing else, it just demonstrates the lack of information that individual had and the fear that they have regarding their housing for their family. So thank you so much. And I'm glad to hear that things are moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Siemens, for bringing that to our attention. And thank you, the city manager, for looking into it further. I'll now turn to Councilman Costick.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the public commenters tonight. Mr. Huebner brought up the concern about the rent stabilization increase. And I just want to note again that I have suggested to my colleagues that we consider allocating some funds from the housing reserve towards helping to support renters who are dealing with an increased rent payment this year, and have asked if staff could come back with some suggestions regarding that and how that might be structured. So looking forward to having more discussions on that in the future. Just two quick things I want to thank some of the city staff for. One was earlier this week, a resident contacted me about a part of a car that had been dumped by the DC police in the front of their yard and was not being picked up. And I sent a message. This was on Eastern Avenue, so right along the border. Sent a message to Chief Duvall and to Director Braithwaite, and Chief Duvall said, I'm headed that way, I'll go check it out. And within, I think, 10 minutes later, it was gone. So just really want to say thank you. The resident deeply appreciated it. And I think that's just a testament to the wonderful things we have in our city and the way that we get service at having our city government. I know there's been a lot of discussion about the value of city government. And so I wanted to call attention to that. And then a few days later, a resident contacted me about the lights on the trail between Poplar and Goody, and really appreciate Director Braithwaite and Public Works staff going out and taking a look at that. And it appears it might be a battery issue, it sounds like. And so they are working on charging those, and we'll see if that can solve the problem there. So hopefully we'll have some working lights there as well. So just want to say a big thank you to the staff members and the many other staff members who do hard work every day. So appreciate all that you're doing.
Great. Thank you. Councilman Searcy.
Thank you. Real quick, just want to remind folks about the Crossroads Farmers Market that is happening on Wednesdays. We have a number of new vendors that are coming out. I got some delicious baked goods. There's pressed juice, which is delicious. So definitely want to encourage people to come out to Ann Street on Wednesdays from 10:30, starting at 10:30. So that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. And lots of vegan options.
There are lots of vegan options.
Lots of vegan options. Anyone else? Comments tonight? Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you, Mayor. First, just following up on what Councilmember Costick said, I think it would be a good idea to explore whether funds in the housing reserve could be used to assist those who may be facing higher rents, even under our rent stabilization program. So I would endorse that idea. Thank her for suggesting it. I apologize because my remote connection wasn't very good on Monday night. At times I was getting cut off, but I did mention one thing, and I think the mayor responded, but I just wanted to outline it in a little bit more detail what I was talking about, and that would be the idea of, as we've done some years in the past, having a session once the dust settles on the budget process, to have a session on looking at the process itself and how we get to the budget, and to do that not during a time when we're grappling with immediately with the numbers. And again, my thought would be, I don't think we could ask the staff to prepare 3 separate budgets, and I don't think under state law that would be appropriate either. But in addition to the main budget proposal, we could also have a set of alternatives, for example, that would show us perhaps, and wouldn't have to be this, but a flat rate, a budget increase in certain areas, and then what constant yield could look like. And then we would have the opportunity to, if we did our budget that way in the future, to more, I think, appropriately weigh the different options, as opposed to doing what we did on Monday. We brought the rate back down to the current rate, which I don't think is a bad thing, but I think having a chance to consider a process like that would be helpful. And then the one other thing, in my remaining minute and 15 seconds, I did have an email exchange at some length, and I appreciate it, with Public Works Director Braithwaite. And I see she's here in the crowd today too. I'm still, if we can call it a crowd, I'm still a little bit concerned about, or unclear about, the process for the stormwater credit. And I did hear from one person who was interested in receiving the credit, but then received a notice saying that the applications would be due on the 30th, which of course is past the 30th of April. The message that we got from Ms. Braithwaite indicated that for this year, because the material was prepared late in the process, there will be a separate pathway for people to get the credit, maybe in the form of a refund later. I don't think everybody understands that or knows that. And so I think somehow for individuals who've contacted the city, number one, we should let them know that. But secondly, we should also, I think, make that more clear publicly. And then the last thing I would say is, and again, my email dealt with this, I'm a little bit unclear on how and when the credit, which fiscal year the credit does or doesn't apply to. And so if we could just really make that crystal clear, I would appreciate that as well. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Anyone else? All right. Just a couple of things. I want to congratulate all the Washington Adventist University graduates. I was able to attend and speak at the graduation on Sunday. It was a great event. It was nice to see all the nursing students actually graduating and everything. It was a wonderful event. I also want to thank Small Things Matters for their Global Youth Service Day that they held on Sunday as well. They had a pronoun table, a kindness program, and hunger awareness. So it was a great turnout as well. I think that's it for me. I'll turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and members of council. I have about 7 items this evening that I'll just cover. Just in response to our budget process and what we can do in the future. I'll just raise for council to consider in the future. It may be helpful and wise at some point for council to consider a finance committee, standing committee, where 3 members of this board work with staff and we talk through not only audit, but also budget. And I think that would be very helpful as we look at out years and budget development. Second item, I just want to wish those on this governing body, members in our community, a happy Mother's Day this Sunday. Hope you're treated well and get to do something fun and exciting this weekend. The third item that I had tonight is the foundation of the Alliance for Community Media, Hometown Media Awards Committee informed the city recently that the city of Tacoma Park has won an award in the category of overall excellence in governmental access. The ceremony is going to be held at the annual conference in Chicago in late June. We'll be putting out more information around this announcement in the coming week. But this award was because of the great work of our city TV, Alvaro, Ben and John, the great work that they do each and every day for this community and this organization, and to see that they brought it home for us and to be acknowledged. Kudos to the city TV team. Another announcement I'll just make, as of Thursday, April 28th, the city of Tacoma Park recreation camps, both Recreation Center and Community Center, are officially licensed through the Maryland Department of Health. The benefits of this licensure program includes extensive staff training and background screening, detailed safety plans and procedures, guaranteed staff to participant ratios 1:15. So this is exciting work, and just want to thank the recreation team, the staff, current and past, because this has been years in the making to get to this point. So kudos to Director Clark, Deputy Director Huffman, and an entire recreation team. I've also want to just bring up and acknowledge and recognize both our city clerk, deputy city clerk, and all city staff, because this week is Public Service Recognition Week, as well as Municipal Clerks Week. And we know that public service is a calling. It is more than a job. And I want to thank staff and the clerks, because they are our unsung heroes in this community and this organization for all the work that they do each and every day. And then I also want to just recognize, as an organization, we've been talking a lot about mental health. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we all have been through a lot over the last couple of years through the pandemic and the effects of COVID. And I just want to encourage us all to continue to check in on one another, your loved ones, coworkers, because we never know what people are going through until it's too late. So just want to acknowledge and encourage as we are an organization, as well as I want to also recognize that as an organization, this is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and just want to recognize and uplift those in our organization and community for contributions of the Asian American community. And I think that's all this evening.
Great. Thank you so much to the city manager for those comments and acknowledgements, and congratulations to our city staff on all the accolades they are bringing home. Thank you very much. We will now go to our voting session. We have the first reading ordinance approving FY 2022 budget amendment number 4. We've had 2 work sessions on this and a pretty in-depth conversation last week. At the current time, the ordinance is the same as what has been presented to us. Would someone like to move the ordinance? Councilwoman Costick moved. Do I have a second? Councilman Dabala, any questions, comments, amendments? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask this is, you know what, since we have 2 people online, let's do a roll call vote. Thank you.
Councilmember Kovar,
Aye.
Councilmember Dabala,
Yes.
Councilmember Costick,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
No,
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Searcy,
No.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes. All right, next we have a resolution authorizing temporary street closures in support of the 2022 Old Town Business Association event calendar. Would someone like to move the resolution? Councilwoman Costick moved. Do I have a second? Councilmember Kovar, sorry, it's hard to see everyone. Any comments, questions on the resolution? Seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to call the vote.
Councilmember Kovar,
Aye.
Councilmember Dabala,
Yes.
Councilmember Costick,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
aye,
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Searcy,
Aye.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes. All right, next we have so that takes care of our voting session. Next, we'll move into our 2 work sessions. The first is a procurement item and the purchase of a police vehicle. I'll turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This item is working with our police department to purchase a hybrid unmarked Ford F-150. This item is already budgeted in the FY 22 budget. This is to continue to meet our sustainability goals and the goal of the chief and the department to replace gasoline powered fleet vehicles to make sure that energy efficient. And Chief, I don't know if it's anything else you want to add to that?
Thank you. I'll see if anyone has any questions. I think I don't have a question, but just on one comment, and I appreciate the city staff putting in the agenda item that the amount was, the item was budgeted. In the future, when we do agenda items, can we actually identify how much was budgeted, just so we know if we're above or beyond what was budgeted? So we keep track of that. Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Kovar.
Yeah, it wasn't 100% clear to me what the vehicle is for, or how it would be used, and I don't know whether the chief can say a few words.
Good evening. The vehicle is for our special assignment team, which is our plainclothes team. It is used to do surveillance on various issues. A lot of our surveillance is done for robberies in certain areas, theft rings in certain areas. We target our special assignment team to problem areas within the city. That vehicle will be used for covert surveillance.
Okay, and it's an F-150, is that right?
That's correct.
That's like a pickup truck, or?
That's correct.
Okay, and I'm just curious, what's the? why that?
When we have our covert vehicles, we want to blend in. And pickup trucks are not traditionally seen as police vehicles. They blend in very well within the community. We also can put stuff in the back of it as well. And that's one of the reasons when we do our covert vehicles, and we normally do not want them to look like police vehicles.
And what's been used previously for this?
We've used various vehicles. I would rather not say publicly what specifically our vehicles are. We use, as stated earlier, we use them for
But there's
covert
one that's
purposes.
wearing out. Is that the?
This is on the replacement cycle
Yeah,
through
okay.
the ERR, through the Vehicle Replacement Committee. So this is one that was on the cycle for replacement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman DeBala.
Yes, speaking of replacement cycle, we talked the other night about the replacement policy. And I have now got a copy of it to refresh my memory. And I just point out that it does say that a vehicle has to have at least 100,000 miles and meet a few other criteria before it can be brought to the committee for replacement, for consideration about being replaced. My question is whether there are any plans for updating the policy based on the last couple of years of fiscal discussion, you know, where we are now as opposed to 5 years ago when this was written.
Okay. I mean, I'll let Director Braithwaite was here when this policy was started. There are multiple factors that go into play when we replace vehicles.
Yeah, I meant.
I'm
I
not
meant
sure
to
what
say
the
that.
specific question was. Are we going to evaluate?
The question
changing
is
that
about the
number?
policy. It's not about, yeah. That number or any of the other numbers or the process in general, because we have talked about it
Yeah,
a couple of times.
we may want to have
recently.
a specific meeting just to discuss
Just to-
the process,
yeah, maybe
not
we
only
should do
the
that.
criteria, but also the process that we use internally to go through vehicles. It's fairly straightforward, but it it has a lot of steps. The 100,000 miles that you mentioned is specific to police vehicles.
Yes.
So other of criteria,
yes.
the police vehicles have 100,000 miles or 8-year replacement cycle.
Right.
Most of the other city vehicles, because of the size of the city, we could own a vehicle for 30 years and not put 100,000 miles on a code enforcement vehicle or some of our other vehicles. So many of the other admin fleet vehicles don't have the mileage criteria. They're more based on the age and then condition. So there's a number of conditional points that are
Right.
reviewed, including accidents, maintenance costs. Sometimes vehicles become obsolete and you can't get their parts anymore. So all those kinds of things are factored into some of the other issues. With the police cars, it's fairly straightforward because they are the higher mileage vehicles. So it's pretty clear 100,000 miles and the 8-year criteria for replacement for a normal patrol vehicle. The police have specialized vehicles that would be same as other city vehicles. We'd look at them individually for condition as well as repair costs.
Thank you. I just, since we have talked about it in the abstract a couple times recently, I just want to get a little more concrete. I do have a specific question about the vehicle in question. So I'm assuming it's at least 8 years old and at least 100,000 miles.
I believe so. If it's up for replacement, it meets all the criteria or one of those criteria. I
Okay.
believe we're replacing a 2013 or 14. I'm not sure, but it would be in that neighborhood.
Yeah, maybe by next week, we could nail that down, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Just
Yeah, sorry.
one clarification. So nail down the year or
The specifics on this vehicle. Again, I'm assuming it's gonna be meeting those qualifications.
The
but
vehicle we're
just
replacing.
The vehicle we're replacing. Yeah, that's all.
It should not be hard to give it to you.
Right.
It's just in the replacement list.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you all get that, but normally what we would have is it would show the replacement vehicles that come. So
Okay,
we
thank
can
you.
get you the information.
Great.
Okay, not seeing any other questions. This will come back to us for a vote next week. Our next item is a presentation of design plans for community center renovation. And I'll turn it back over to the city manager.
All right, Director Braithwaite, and we also have representatives from the architectural firm that's going to present the latest renovation plans. Director Braithwaite.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here this evening to present the current design plans for the lower level of the community center. This project has had a very long history, starting even before 2013. Several police chiefs, at least one police chief ago, and several other leadership members of both the police department as well as city management since that time. And over the course of time, some of the needs have changed. And some of our design processes have been altered based on need, as well as funding sources and trying to identify available funding. It has been my pleasure to work with members of Bignell, Watkins, and Hasser, Greg Gilbert, who I've worked with for many, many years, and Elizabeth Moody more recently. Bignell, Watkins, Hasser was the architect that designed and oversaw construction of the Public Works facility. And I think we can all say without question that that was a premier project of the city of Tacoma Park. It was designed well, it's LEED silver, it came in on budget. We had a fantastic contractor that did the work, and we I think more than proved that we are able and capable to do renovation projects when properly designed, properly funded, and when we have all the management pieces in place. And so I really hold out the Public Works Department as a kind of a model of the way to do this. So with that, we lean a lot on Bignell, Watkins, and Hasser and their expertise. Not only have they worked on the lower level of the community center, but we've also had them in to take a look at various other areas of the city that have needed, the buildings that have needed renovation, including our finance department office, some of the work that was done in our planning division. We have a cursory plan for our IT and communications office, and they've taken a look at other space needs as well. So it's been a pleasure to work with them, and they've been around and working with us long enough that they understand the city and sustainability and good quality materials is kind of a cornerstone of what I most appreciate about working with them. And we've had a very good experience in the work we've done to date. So with that, unless the chief had anything he wanted to add, I was just going to kind of turn it over to Greg and Elizabeth to sort of walk us through. You have the documents in front of you that show both existing plans as well as proposed renovation plans. I know for some of us, it's a challenge to go from 2D to 3D, imagining what a space is and then seeing it on 2D. So feel free to raise your hands or ask questions. It is a little bit challenging to see something on a flat piece of paper and try to imagine the space both as it is now and as it will be. So that'll be our goal this evening to make sure that that's able to be understood. I think the only other thing I wanted to add was sort of as after we go through this process, if you want to speak a bit on the next steps, be happy to go through that because there are quite a few steps that we'll need to follow in order to keep this project moving forward. So with that, Greg, and do we have it up on? You can pull it up on the. Hard copy plans you probably have as well.
Good. While he's doing that, I want to thank Daryl for that glowing recommendation there. But you didn't actually state for anybody.
You have to
who's
say
like-
Daryl is not a glowing recommendation person. So enjoy.
That's right. So if anybody who's been in the city long enough, when they come driving up and there's this fire station at the top of the hill there, that's where we met Daryl. So we actually did expansion renovation to the Tacoma Park Fire Station. So that got us into the community. We got to understand what the actual fabric of the community is made up for anybody who was here during that process, which was 20 years ago, but we're still there, still great. And we want to continue doing work for you in this community. So as we were working on this project, one of the items we kept going back to is the atrium space. And so I'm sort of going to be focusing on that piece right now. So the atrium space is sort of an underutilized part of the building currently. It's really set up as more of a walkway area where you're moving from transient, we're going from one location to another. Part of being able to take and infill this area will allow us to have more gathering spaces and utilize it. Also, there's issues with acoustics Lots of times you can be up on the third floor in a meeting and you can hear people buying soda on the lower level. So it's sort of distracting. And so part of this concept, filling that in will resolve that. And also what will happen is because we're taking that large volume of space and cutting into, 2/3 of its space, we'll have better control of the HVAC and the thermal properties within that area. So up on the upper level, which would be page 3. One more. There we go. One more. Good. Okay, so on the upper level, right now we have this little corridor that leads to this tiny little closet. So what's going to happen is we're going to infill sort of that weird shaped open space there, and to expand this into a larger usable storage area. And we also think what's going to occur is by building this wall, that small transitional space up there will actually be turned into a place where you can have meetings, you have gatherings. That third level space with the carpet and the seats. I rarely see anybody up there except if you're waiting to go into the city's offices. But by doing this, we will be able to define that space, and that will become another space usable by the community. An additional benefit of infilling that atrium part there is that when we go from a 3-story atrium to a 2-story atrium, the need for the smoke evac system goes away. So in your tower, you have these gigantic louvers that I am told leak all the time. And also they're set up in such a way that there's low acoustical properties, not acoustical, with thermal properties. So you're losing a lot of heat that's going out of there. So one of the benefits that we can probably talk about later is as we're going through this process, we can actually eliminate all that stuff up there. So that'd be less maintenance and less, yes.
Dabala, they can't hear you online unless your
Sorry,
microphone's
is
on.
that the
Okay.
is that the so-called chase, cable chase or on the drawings? No, it's something, okay, never mind the cable chase. Keep going.
No, okay. So that's what's happening on the upper level. Now we go back in the other direction one. Okay, so on the main level, this is where we're looking to infill the actual atrium itself. This will open it up for more gathering spaces, being able to have exhibits. We're also going to do some modifications to the entrance, to the rear entrance of the auditorium, and make it more accessible and noticeable, so that when meetings occur, that would be less of a rear entrance to the auditorium and can now start becoming used as a main entrance. So when activities are occurring here, people aren't moving in and out at the front of the room, they can be doing that through the back. So when we get to the lower level, it's because it's I will call it sort of like less accessible.
Sorry to interrupt you. You said interrupt you with questions of fact.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So on the maps main level, I don't see much of a difference with the doorways here.
For
Say
what?
that, see the entrance here.
No, well, technically, what's happening is where the doorway is right
Yes.
now, when we do the infill above.
The first doorway, not this doorway.
The one that's outside.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Right. We're doing some changes to the ceiling area when
Oh,
we
the
put the
so-called
coverings
balcony
over
above.
top.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
I
so
got it.
plan wise, it doesn't change, but the way we're doing the design, it becomes more noticeable and more prevalent as an entrance to this portion of the building.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. So the ground floor we feel is just sort of less accessible to the public. You're coming in through the lower level. And so it's kind of an underutilized portion of the building. And so what I'm going to do is have Elizabeth talk about what's occurring down there.
In the proposed floor plan, the ground level will now feature a secure vestibule and lobby. It will also feature conference rooms accessible to the public, as well as a mental health suite. So there are now going to be an accessible bathroom right off of the lobby. And we are making the vestibule visibly secure in order to provide anonymity and privacy. We're enlarging the conference room, which can be used by the public for meetings and interviews. We created a mental health suite. There is an office area for the mental health professionals, as well as a private conference room for mental health consultations. There's a kitchenette, which is going to be like really used for providing food for the mental health patients in order to provide comfort, both physical and emotional. These areas can all be accessed through the secure vestibule and lobby. That way they don't have to pass through the space, the back of house areas, in order to access it. There's another accessible restroom right off the mental health suite, fully ADA compliant. And then in addition to that, we're enlarging the mental health crisis response team room and the victim witness coordinator room. This all provides a more accessible, inclusive, and functional use of the space. And I can answer any questions now at this time.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Siemens, I can't I can't see you. Do you have a question?
I do. I just was curious. Right now, we have a walk-up window for community members to talk with the police dispatcher. Do we still have a walk-up option for people to talk with the police department?
Yes, we do. So if you're taking a look at the map, the plan in front of you. So as you come into the vestibule, during the normal day operations, there's what we mark as receptionist. That's the window that you would go to during the normal working hours. During the closed hours, there's another window that's right in front of you as you enter, and that's the dispatch area that you.
Oh yeah, I can see it now. It's a little bigger print now. I can see.
Yeah,
it.
there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also want to point out that currently when you walk in that space, you're going to at a loss unless you've been there before, where to go. It's huge. There's pillars and there's some dark window way back away from you. So I know when I first walk in there, I don't know where I'm supposed to go. And usually there's a parking enforcement space that's kind of empty. So what this will do is create a place where you walk in the main doors, you see a door that takes you to the police department mental health section. You see a door that takes you to the elevators or the stairs. So it becomes very clear when you enter the building where you're supposed to go, depending on what you want to do. And then once you enter that second set of doors, then the dispatch window will be much enhanced and people will be able to more clearly identify that dispatch is back there. There will also be the reception window. So people who are there to pay parking tickets or have an appointment or a meeting, they'll be able to be, easily greeted and facilitated for that. I was also just going to mention a bit of why we combined the third floor with the first floor. And part of the reason is when you're doing that atrium close in, you need to put steel beams in the opening. And if you're going to go through that effort, you might as well identify other places where those steel beams could be helpful, because it'll be a very expensive project to do the third floor storage space on its own. It's also a portion of the project that as we get pricing back, if the cost is too high, it's a place where we can sacrifice that portion of the project and still have the rest of it done. But as long as we're going to be doing steel beams and steel girders for construction, it makes sense to partner those two things together to reduce some of the expense of that portion of the work.
Right.
Thank
And
you.
did somebody?
No, I just think.
I was also remiss in not tapping a nod of the hat to Councilmember Siemens, who actually the close into the atrium, I think, was an idea that he originated at least in 2011 or 12. So the germ of the plan really credit goes to him for starting this process.
Thank you.
Great. And I just had a question on the reception, now that you brought that up. Who would sit there? Like what staff person?
When you come in and you look to the left, not the vestibule where the dispatch is,
Yeah.
we envisioned having our staff there that are normally there. Right now, you have to hit a buzzer and have our staff come from the
Right.
back. We envision having one of our staff members there to not only guide people through police issues, but also if they needed to go upstairs or something to that effect. Because right now, it's just not efficient. I think, as Director Braithwaite said earlier, you walk in and you just don't know where
Yeah.
to go. So it creates a streamline. So if someone does not know they immediately need to go to the left to go to the elevator to the top floor, they would be greeted by that receptionist there. They would have a multitude of things. So they would have information of, okay, you're looking for housing, this is where you go. And they could buzz them up there. We talked about having 2 different windows there, so we could also have finance down there as well. That didn't end up as an option just because of the space that we had there. But we think it's just going to allow people to come in immediately if they're concerned where they need to go. There'll be a live person there, as opposed to right now, if you walk in, your option is a dispatcher who may not be able to immediately give you the attention you need because they might be on a call.
Right.
Or to hit the buzzer, which is still very confusing. People, I can't tell you how many times when I walk in the station, I'm telling people, well, do you need help? Hit the buzzer or I'll get somebody to come out to you. So this is just going to create a situation where someone that comes in is greeted by a live person.
Yeah. Well, I'm the mayor of the city and I get confused. So you think? Whenever I walk down there, I'm always like, what am I supposed to do? So, before I turn over to Councilwoman Searcy, I just have one other question of if we could explain sort of the area that's going to be the mental health crisis response and police dispatch. How is that working with both of them?
I can talk a little bit about that. So the mental health suite to the left as you walk in off the vestibule area, that's where the mental health counselors are going to screen people. So there'll be a screening office where they can meet confidentially with individuals. And there'll also be a meeting room that can be used by the mental health counselors, but it also, if it's not being used by them, can be used by other departments within the city. I can't tell you how many times Grace Wiggins from housing came down and had to use our interview room. So now we'll have 2 rooms to do that. We'll have the conference room to the right, which is also an interview room, and we'll also have it there. But describing how that kind of works, the mental health counselors, that's where they mainly would see patients. The dispatch area is where our pilot is working through dispatching the mental health counselors as sole responders. And part of that would be how the calls come in. So we envision having our police dispatchers, but also mental health counselors, both in the same kind of dispatch triage area. So that area that says mental health crisis response and police dispatch is solely related to screening the calls. That would not be a public area. That would be where we would screen the calls for service from the public.
Got it. So the idea is that the mental health counsel would be there in order to work with the dispatcher to decide who gets sent out.
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out through with the Department of Health and Human Services, who we're partnering with on the pilot. But what we would envision is not only training our dispatchers on how to triage those calls, but possibly having a separate dispatcher that would. Yes. So if someone called in and said, I am in crisis, we could call one of the mental health counselors to come up into that dispatch area and enter all the information into the call. So we're still trying to work through the logistics of that, but it's multi-steps. So number one, it would be training all of our existing dispatchers how to triage the calls. Is this a call that can be a sole responder model? We work through DHS and we are going to be the pilot for this, what they hope to do throughout the county. So it could be 2 different ways, depending on if the mental health counselor was working. If the mental health counselor was working, they could come up and take that call. If they were not working, our dispatcher would have to triage it. And that's where the training comes into play. And then they would dispatch it out to another crisis team or so on and so forth, or we call somebody out. With 2 counselors, we're not going to be able to be there 24/7. So there are going to be some times that that's not available. But that was the thought process when we put that together there. Great.
Thank you. Councilwoman Searcy.
Picking up at that point. Yeah, because that makes sense to me. I think with the increase in the mandates around 988, it kind of will create, quite frankly, like two types of dispatch. You have like your 911 and then you have your 988. All right. And so that's what's happening, I believe, across the country, where there's a lot of states that are receiving quite a bit of money to institute like that type of line. So sometimes it's really clean. Someone knows to call like a 988, so it gets routed appropriately. And sometimes it's not. Someone will still call 911. So I think it makes sense to have the dispatchers together. One of the things that gives me, bless you, a little bit of pause is having the mental health consultation and perhaps the mental health team rooms being so close in proximity to perhaps what could be viewed as the police department space, just because of what people may be mentally experiencing at the time in which they're kind of coming in for help. So has there been thought around making sure that the look and feel, or that there's enough separation where someone who may be in crisis doesn't feel like they're going to jail?
None of the suite that's here is designed to make somebody feel like they're incarcerated. And as you can see, there's kind of a separate entrance that you can come in there that allows them to feel like they are there to see the mental health counselors. That's why it's kind of in the front. But I will tell you, at times there are patients where we want police close, because patients right now, I will tell you, the crisis intervention teams will not see patients without police present or in the proximity. We had an individual that our former city manager knew that was suffering from some issues, and we knew her. We allowed her to sleep here in our building overnight. But when the crisis team from Montgomery County came out to meet with her, they refused to meet with her unless we were present. So we're trying to get away from that. We're trying to identify calls that don't need that element. That was absolutely not a call that needed a police presence. Now, there are some calls that do. I mean, some of these calls are, somebody's going to come in and they're threatening suicide. They may be armed and so on and so forth. But everything we've done in this design, and just so you know, we redesigned this with that in our thought process, is how do we create a situation that's still in a 24/7 environment, which is needed, but still allows that privacy. So everything that we've done is to try to create that. So if you look, you come in through the one door, and then you have that private soundproof room where people can come in and receive that consultation. They would have to go through that other door to kind of join police. So the mental health, where it says mental health team, that's their office space. That's where they are physically going to sit to do their work. So essentially, when a person comes in crisis, they would walk through that one door, and then they would walk into that conference room. They wouldn't walk into the police area. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. That's helpful. Thank you.
Councilman Costick.
I have a bunch of questions, so I will try to be brief. Following up on that, I also share some of the concerns about just the location of this, and I'm thinking about, as people walk in to the lobby and the way that it is sort of, it might be more of a messaging and labeling issue than anything. I feel like people think, I'm going to the ground floor, I'm going to the police department. And I imagine as you walk in, you'll see police. So I'm just wondering, is there a thought about kind of how the messaging and the signage there would work? Because I hear your point that they're walking into the vestibule, and then there's a conference room kind of over to the right, and they're not in the police department. But if they're walking in and kind of the lobby says police, it feels a little bit like they are.
But understand that, yes, when people previously came to the ground floor, they were coming to police because that was the only entity on the ground floor. So when you come in and you walk in that first vestibule area, and I have the timer over the vestibule, so I'm trying to see it, and maybe I can look at it. That's not going to be covered with police information. Where you walk in, you may see, so there's that lobby where you come in. The vestibule area, yes, it's going to be very clearly marked where police is. So police dispatch, and it's going to say mental health crisis and police dispatch. Understand that. So you're not going to feel like you're walking into a police station. When someone comes in, and I'll be honest with you, I've seen very few people in crisis that are that concerned about it's a police station. And we're very aware if someone does have those, hey, look, I'm afraid to go to the police station. And we'll look for alternative areas that they can go. We've done that. So I don't want to come to the police station. I want to go somewhere else. Well, we'll take you to we've gone over to the Civic Center and found a room there. So there are ways that we can work around that. But I think people need to understand that we are setting precedents here, but it's going to involve the police in passing off these calls, and we have to work with people. So understanding our impact on how we deliver the service, but also understanding that we still need to work together. So all of the things and all of the design here is geared towards creating comfort for people that come in that need those services.
Thank you. And I appreciate that point. I guess I'm just thinking more about sort of just the messaging more than anything as you're walking in. And if we can just think through what those signs look like, kind of what you think, and even if it is different in the future, I think there's sort of that vestige of like, this was the police department. So if I've lived here for 20 years, I've thought of this as the police department down here. So I think just maybe in designing the interior design or some aspect of that, it'd be useful to think through how that looks.
We can, as I said earlier, everything we're doing in this is try to create the comfort. As the city manager mentioned earlier, it is Mental Health Awareness Month. As I've said multiple times, I think there's no more critical issue here in the city of Tacoma Park. So we want to make sure that we do this right. So whatever we can do, it's going to be geared around providing services that people utilize and people feel comfortable utilizing. So we can definitely take that into account when we try to put signage up.
Thank you. My other questions are more sort of general about the project overall. And I'm wondering on the cost estimate, how recent that is and how likely we think that is to take into account inflation and other recent
It's not
changes.
recent at all. So when we go from this final design, Bignell, Watkins and Hasser has done a bit of cost estimating early on in the project. Our intention is to bring on our construction manager that's currently did the work for our library project for the risk assessment, constructability analysis, and the cost estimating in more current times and more, they've got much more new numbers and new data. So once the design has been, finalized and blessed and we're ready to go, bid documents getting prepared, we'll go through that same process that we recently went through with the library through Arcadis. Working with them on the library project, they are able to work very quickly. Their product has been very well received, very professional. And they really have gone above and beyond in terms of communicating with the architectural firm and their cost estimator. So we feel like we've got a really good partner there. That would be a critical next step of this process as we get ready to go out to bid, to have another set of eyes on it, just looking at the constructability factor, risk factors, and costs.
And I know you mentioned that the third floor might be one place where if we have to reduce costs, we could. Are there other aspects that we could look at specifically if we need to?
Yeah, once we get to the process of bid response, we'll have in there our materials and our kind of ideal situation for all kinds of finishes and things. And it will not be top end, but it'll certainly be high quality, sustainable materials with an environmental sensitivity and preference for a color scheme and a style that we have developed for the building. When we get bids back, if it turns out that the costs are extreme or are not, that's a conversation we start to have with the bidders, and you can take a look at using a laminate counter instead of another type. And there's things that the architects can help us with in terms of identifying cost reduction measures, as well as the contractor themselves. But that all gets worked out in a very detailed way once you're further down the road with your construction team or through the process of bidding.
Okay.
This project has already been once through the county with building permits. So we were as close to that before. The building permits are expired, so we need to go back through to the county with that process.
Yeah, and I certainly hope that there aren't significant increases in costs, but it certainly seems likely that there will be.
It's a
So,
very, it's the Wild West in terms of trying to predict this stuff currently with COVID and the impacts on the materials as well as the current global situation. So everybody's taking the best guess they have, but we're in a really an unprecedented time in terms of trying to guess impacts of materials.
And I just have two other questions. One is how much collaboration there's been between the architecture and the planning for this and the library project, because I know they're separate projects, but they do obviously involve, particularly with the recreation department space, some kind of similar space. Have you thought through the two of them together?
Yes, in some ways. It's been a bit of a, we've been go, stop, start on this project for years. So, kind of like, I'll believe it when I see it situation. And there's been a bit of that on the library as well. So, we're taking secret side bets on which one's going to actually start first. But that said, one of the planning tools that we're using is our construction management team, which we intended to have them overseeing both projects. So they'll be, in addition to city staff, a partner that we'll have to help to think through some of the implications of staging areas, who needs to do what next, where are we going to put staff. They'll be working with us to try to develop that phasing plan and construction plan. So they'll be a critical component of that. And so much of it will depend on when these projects are ready to go, when we've signed contracts, and then what the lead time is for the materials. So there are so many unknowns in that we don't yet know kind of where it's going to fall. But guaranteed, it'll be chaotic and difficult. We've gone through this once before when the community center was renovated in 2005 and 2006, and it was chaotic. It was difficult for staff. Back then, no one had ever heard of teleworking. So I think we're in a far better situation now than we were then in terms of our ability to provide services in unique ways. So I think that we'll rely on some of that as this process evolves, as people get impacted in their office space, or certainly parking is going to be a huge thing. So we're going to have to arrange for offsite parking for city employees and others. So there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of specifics that we'll need to work out once we are finally ready to go.
Is there some cost savings to using the construction management team for both?
I don't know. I really don't know. My guess would be that the cost, the proposals they'll give us would be independent of doing the library project at the same time. However, there's just going to be some cooperation and some understanding that we'll gain by that. I don't really think it's so much a cost saving measure as it is a kind of coordination benefit.
Okay. And then my last question is related to the design itself. If you could go to the main floor drawing.
Second floor or
this floor.
Existing?
Yeah, the new one. I'm curious.
I think they're on the same page, right? Yeah, side by side, that helps. Yeah, slide up, I think, page 2.
Just thinking about the big open space there that gets filled in and what exactly the plan is for that space. I can see there being a value to having a big space sometimes, but is there, did you consider filling in some of that with some additional conference rooms or offices? And what would the total design look like?
Yeah, we did not design out that space as part of this project, mostly because we want to kind of live with it. And as we've all learned, there, the needs of the city change in terms of staffing and positions. And so I think this will be a space that we will have available to start thinking about the implications of. Certainly, it's going to be a community gathering space. It's going to, make the building a little more easily used in terms of places where people can get together and hold receptions or events. Or even little sidebar conversations. But in terms of programming the space, that's really in a future phase. We didn't feel we had the budget nor really the well-defined scope of services, what we need. I think as this, once we get through ARPA and some of the other projects, we're going to have better and better defined needs on part of city space needs, whether it's more community rooms, more program rooms, or more staff rooms. So I think that's kind of going to evolve over time. But now we'll have a big open place in which we have some space. Right now, we don't have many places where we can put either functions or people.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Councilman Kovar.
Thank you, and thank you for the information. I also did have concerns about both the timing with the library, and I understand since they're two separate projects and they'll be bid separately, we may not know exactly what the timing will be like, but it would seem to me that if both of those things were happening at the same time, that would be a big challenge. So if, let's just say, both went out for bid around the same time and it looked as if that was happening simultaneously, is that something we could handle?
Well, I don't mean to be glib, but are you a pull the Band-Aid off quick kind of guy or a sort of a slowly edge it
Well,
off? I mean, I think
Depends whether
there's,
it's me or the city, to be honest.
there's been, you could talk pluses and minuses of both options. One is to get the construction done and over with and on track so we can get back to reusing the building and do what it's intended for. Anybody will tell you who went through that last construction that any construction project is disruptive. So it really doesn't matter if it's on the floor you're working on or right beside you, it's
Yeah.
disruptive. So we're going to be disrupting operations of employees and visitors to this building through the construction project. So I think there's some benefit of reducing that timeframe so that we're not stretching it out over 2 or 3 years, but rather, 12 to 18 months and just getting it done. That's kind of my logic on it. If I had if we had a choice in how this was evolving, clearly we would not plan to do two, disruptive projects either at the same time or back to back, but that's where we are. I think there's strong need for both. So, we're trying to move forward with the project and just get them going. And as I understand it, the library bid is out or will be May 8th. I think it's going to be advertised. So that's on a much more, early track. This still needs to go through final design permitting and then before we put the bid out. So there's several months difference between them.
And I also had a similar question to Councilmember Costa in terms of the open space. And I understand what you're saying. We wouldn't be ready to say, okay, now let's break that up into 7 more offices or something of that nature. But would the idea be that initially it would just be left open? Or could it be furnished a little bit so that there's, waiting areas?
Sure.
Or.
Yeah, my sense was that it would be primarily open. We could do some seating areas. It will greatly improve the noise acoustics issue from the 3rd to the 1st floor, but you'll still have those issues even between 2 floors. So you can't really have a quiet chat in that space.
Okay.
It's really going to be a very public space until we put walls up.
And so for the upper floor, that's the small area where there's a few couches now. And I didn't quite get that. Would that be staying as a seating area? Or is that the thing that would be converted into?
Yeah, well, at this point, there's no plan to change the use of that. But again, I think one of the challenges that we have in this building, there's no storage for equipment or materials or anything that the departments have. Right now, HCD uses a tiny little closet in the back of that 3rd floor hallway. So by enlarging that, we'll have space for much more storage. And I think as Greg was trying to point out, it will help define that space a little better on the 3rd floor. So it won't feel quite as spread out. So it'll have a more defined seating area feel to that front area that we currently use now as a lobby.
Okay, and I just have 3 more things. As you know, I've asked about stormwater capacity more with regard to the library project than with this one, but I think we really do need to have some more details on that before we're ready to go with these. And then additionally, and this is maybe something more for the police. So going back to the previous screen where it showed the proposed, right? So would police personnel, when they're going out on a call or going out on their shift or whatever, would they be passing through the same main door down here as everybody else?
We have several exits
Okay.
outside of the building. A lot of officers go out the back door. We also have a side door. A lot of people park there.
Mhm.
We do have officers that come in and out, but primarily if they're going out on a call, they normally would go through some of the other exits. So normally that would not be, and I don't envision it with the change as we have it now,
Mhm.
that would be an area that we would encourage officers
Yeah.
to go through. We'd use the two other
Okay.
exits.
So in terms of the concern about unduly policey feeling entrance, people will still understand it is, but you're not gonna have people coming and going as the possibly nervous person comes up there. They're not gonna be running out on a call out that same door in all probability, it sounds like is what you're saying, right?
No, that would not happen. And I just want to stress that there's this thought that most of these crisis teams are in police departments, not even with the thought that we have in place, and they're not limiting people from getting the services. There are very few people that, because they see police, won't get the services. When people are in crisis, they want to get the services. When people have identified that they have had prior experience with police and they don't want to deal with police, we ask those questions ahead of time. So we wouldn't meet them here. We would meet them on an alternative site. So I just want to stress that there, because I don't want the public to think that our patients that are dealing with these situations are not taking services because they are somehow intimidated or scared by the police. That's just not the case in the vast majority of
All right,
cases.
and honestly, I'm thinking about less necessarily for those cases than just a random person who wants to come to the police department and might be a little bit nervous, that's all, because that can happen.
Yeah, if the vast majority of times, if someone, like I say, we're not going to encourage this as an exit area or entrance area for our police now, just because the dynamic of the area has changed significantly, as opposed to what it was previously. It was an open area, and obviously walking through there you're not in such tight confines. But if an officer came in now, literally, and people were standing there, it'd be a much tighter fit. So obviously, we'll encourage them to come in through the
Okay,
other.
and just the last thing related to mental health, but a different piece of it. We've also talked about the Adventist Healthcare plan and their recommendation or their offer to make some space available for mental health over in the office building that's adjacent to the former hospital site. I don't know if we know enough about it yet, but do you see that space as potentially, meshing with what we're talking about here?
There's a possibility. There are a lot of moving parts with the mental health initiative. One is what we're doing as far as the mental health response and the immediate response. But we've also met with other entities that want to have long-term mental health sites, long-term beds for either, when I say long-term, anywhere from 48 hours to 5 days. So that may be an option on that site to house those particular individuals. The goal is to have these initial services, but also have someone that is in crisis. And the problem now is, as I've said this repeatedly, is what we're doing is we're just triaging these. We're not following up. So if we simply kept it as is, we brought people in, we screened them, but we didn't follow up. We didn't do the casework that our victim witness work coordinator is doing and reaching back out and talking to them. Or if they need 48-hour confinement, or they need 5 days, having a site here in Tacoma Park. So that may be an option to have more long-term beds or chairs or something to that effect. So Deputy City Manager Clark and I have met with different representatives from the county and other entities, and we're working through the best locations. But I think we need to push Adventist Healthcare to provide those services. So I think that losing the hospital, losing a lot of the mental health outreach capacity that we had there, I think that would be a good option. So in other words, we have somebody that comes in, they need more extensive services. They're going in the street as opposed to going to Shady Grove. And the county is trying to do these across the county. They're trying to do ones that can house maybe 10 to 12 people, and then a larger facility that I believe is in the works for Clarksburg, and that's a long-term plan. So I think as we talk through what's the best mental health response, I think that option may be, it could possibly be that now the counselors can work out of there, or it could be both, but I think now that probably would work best for the more long-term stuff.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, actually, don't go away. If I could just say back what I think I hear you saying, just to make sure I understand it. It seems to me that when we're talking about the mental health services, there's 3 levels. One is what you're showing here is the pilot project you're moving forward with that we've talked about for a while, which is really figuring out how do we respond in those crisis situations and have mental health counselors possibly be the sole responders there. And then you get to the other situation where somebody is potentially in crisis, having a situation where they need assistance, but we could probably do it here in the community if we had the proper services. And that's what Adventist is thinking about, providing the space for us. And so that would be like having somebody for under observation for 48 hours or 5 days. And then the third area is what we're talking about with Adventist community, Adventist Health, is including the behavioral health services within the primary care. So it seems like they're, in an ideal world, if all these things move, these pieces move together, we'll have 3 different levels of ways to address mental health, behavioral health within the city.
You summed it up exactly the way, if in a perfect world, that's the way it would work. Since we're kind of gravitating away from this project and talking about mental health, the one other thing that mental health counselors are going to do is try to provide programs for our youth and our elderly who are suffering immensely as from the result of COVID. So in addition to doing the responding to calls for service, we envision them creating programs where they can work with MCPS to get some mental health crisis intervention training and some other things. We talked today about some of the violent interactions that our youth are having at the middle school and the elementary schools. And we talked about some programs that are in place. Many of you are familiar with our Active Bystander for Law Enforcement training that trains our officers to report bad behavior by other officers. There are programs that train kids to report bad behavior from other kids, and there are no consequences and no retribution for doing so. So creating programs where kids feel comfortable coming forward and reporting incidents, because when we have a large fight at the park, there are 20, 30 other kids there that are watching this that can report it, but we need to create a culture where they feel comfortable doing so and don't feel like they're going to be retaliated against. So those are some of the things we're trying to work through with the mental health pilot as well. So if there's one program I'm really excited about, this is the one. And I've said that repeatedly. Mental health services are critical in our community. I think there's so many calls are related to mental health crisis. So I'm really excited about this program, I think, but to sum up what you just said, yes, those 3 tiers are essentially, if they were in place, I think that would be the model we would like to see.
Great, thank you. And sorry to the architects who were sitting through our conversation on, but hopefully that will help inform you as you're thinking about the space and how we want to use it. Councilman Dabala.
In following up one more twist on that. So there's the potential for Venice space. There's the notion that the pilot program, at least as city funded, is short term. So I am assuming that the architects thought about other uses of these spaces if it turns out that the mental health county sucks it up and puts it near here, but not in this building. And maybe we get that lucky. So what's the thought there in terms of this space that's being proposed?
So that's a great question. Just to backtrack, we are hopeful that after our 2-year pilot, that the county will take over services and we will have like services through the county. That's our hope. That's not a guarantee, but that's our hope. But as you said earlier, that might not be the guarantee that they will occupy that site. So when we designed that site with the architects, we designed it in mind with creating a community space that still could be utilized. So in other words, I've talked previously about how many times we've had to have police and other departments have had to try to have conversations with people in the atrium, and you can hear them on the 3rd floor. One of our officers was having a conversation with an individual today, and I heard it from the 3rd floor, and it was a confidential conversation that should not be heard by others. So that room, the room right off where it says private conference room, mental health, could be repurposed to a meeting room, confidential meeting room that all departments could utilize. And we could use the mental health office space. Right now, just so you know, we have our conference room is office space. Our emergency preparedness manager and our safe speed coordinator sit in that office. That's how desperate we are for office space. So we've thought about that, and I think the most important room, and it talks to I talk about the mental health counselors, would be that first room, and that's why we still kept it separate, because we want that to be able to be utilized if the mental health counselors aren't utilizing it by other departments. And even now, yes, that's earmarked for mental health counselors, and that would be the primary use of it. But that doesn't mean that HCD or another or finance or someone else could not utilize that room for something else. Someone comes in and they're having a crisis with housing. Like I said, Grace Wiggins was a regular using our interview room. That would give her the option to go in there and utilize that confidential room. And she still can do that now, because I don't envision that this is going to be occupied 24/7. I don't know if that answers your question, but we thought that through when we work with the architects to try to plan this space.
Yes, thank you. That really helps. So the secure area starts after reception and the vestibule?
Yeah, if you walk in, you'll see that one door to the right, and that's what basically will take you back to the police area. We are going to have a police employee in that reception area, but that's a civilian employee. That's not a sworn police employee.
Yeah,
if-
thanks. I'm a little confused about the lobby vestibule, like why is there, so I thought originally, yes, and now more architectural questions.
Mhm.
I thought that was the secure area, but now I hear, no, that's not. So what's the thinking there?
So the vestibule, number 5, I don't think you can see the number, but when you walk in, there's the lobby, then there's the vestibule.
Right.
That acts as like an entry space into the reception, which is to the left. And that's when I'm referring to as the secure lobby, because that's separating the space from the back of house areas, including dispatch
Okay,
and the crisis response team.
and it's an entry to a reception, but it is
It
better
keeps it
than what's
separate.
there now.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I just was trying to understand it. So
Be a
so
little clear,
functions.
that space, Cindy, with the 3 doors, those would all be secure doors. So you couldn't just wander through, anybody couldn't wander through there. You'd have to be opened or have a
So
swipe
somebody
card
comes
to
in
access.
for the mental health purpose, they're in the vestibule, but they're not literally in the
They
police
won't just
department.
walk right back.
And they're also not
Yeah,
floating
they will
around in the
be,
lobby
they'll
next to the
be
elevator.
walked into the
Yeah, okay,
space.
I understand that now. Thank you. That
Mhm.
really helps. I wanted to ask about where some functions that it may just be a matter of labeling. So there's the traffic section, which is on the ground floor. On the existing floor plan, there's traffic, as in traffic counter and traffic.
Some of the existing floor plan is not consistent where we currently have staff. So I'd have to see the
Okay.
yeah, it's
then-
not,
then
some of it
never
is not
mind.
consistent.
That
Some of these
might-
are old drawings that are not consistent where we currently have staff. So if you
Right.
look at the current drawings, one of the rooms that's marked NIC off the main lobby is marked as a conference room. It's not. It's now
Okay.
office space.
Right.
So
right.
I, without looking at that
Oh,
current
never
drawing,
mind then.
I
Never
can't say
mind
that
then.
it's
Yeah,
consistent.
so
The labels to the rooms might not be consistent.
Speaks
with
to
what
the
we're utilizing for.
flexibility of the space.
Yeah,
Got
because
it.
currently our traffic office is to the, you just,
Is wherever
it's
it
a
is.
tiny little, it's an old closet.
But yeah,
So,
but it
current-
will find a home in the new.
yeah, that's going to be exactly where it is. So if you're looking at this drawing where it says traffic, that is now where we greet people. Where it says traffic counter, that's
Yeah.
actually where the receptionist
Where the
greets
buzzer,
people. Yeah,
right.
yeah, correct. So this is not correctly marked. If you go directly to the left of where it says E traffic and you look
Uh-huh.
at that first conference where first room
where-
where off
yeah.
of E break area, that's where the traffic office is. Sorry to say that Corporal Sims in the back, that shares a closet with Sergeant
Thank
Robeson
you for
currently.
your flexibility.
But we're hopeful that we can move them to a larger space when the neighborhood services moves up to HCD. We'll probably move them over to a much larger space.
Okay, so I was wondering about such mundane features as you mentioned, the architect mentioned the HVAC system. So if you're closing in an atrium, you solve some problems, but you potentially create others. So what's the thinking about HVAC, lighting, circulation of air, that kind of thing when you have a closed
Yes. So
ground level floor as opposed to all that
correct.
other
So,
air
so one
circulating
of the
through?
things that's specific for this design, that dispatch area, the dispatch area has its own sole HVAC system
Oh,
that
okay.
we'll be bringing in. So of course, all the systems we're bringing in right now are much more high efficiencies. You know, all the lighting is LED. And because we're now taking that portion of the building as to have its own standalone system, that allows us to then recirculate
better.
air into other areas.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
While you're on a roll with sustainability features, is there anything else you want to mention?
Can you repeat that?
What you can't hear through all the layers of cloth. Sustainability features. You mentioned LED lighting just now.
Yes, so basically, right, so everything that is new, of course, are the finishes and all that stuff, all the recycled content is, 75% and up. As we bring in new controls for the existing HVAC, that's where we're really getting the efficiency from. So the main systems in the building are remaining. We're just having the ability to rework some ductwork and put different controls on it so that we're not overcooling or overheating different parts of the building.
Okay, great. And what happens to the cable chase area that's marked on the ground floor, old existing network next to traffic?
Oh, okay, yeah, that just goes away.
It just goes away.
It goes away.
Yeah,
Connection where all lines and pipes are going.
right.
Right.
And- I'm sorry, it remains. Okay. It's just was wondering because it didn't make it to the new drawing, to the new floor plan. And in terms of project management, so the thinking, this might not be an architectural question, or maybe it is. The thinking then is that the construction management firm would manage both projects once they're rolling, so that we don't have the issue about staff capability to manage two construction projects at the same time.
Having lived through a couple of construction projects, it takes multiple people, both in-house staff as well as contractual staff, to make a project run smoothly. We'll have the architectural team that will be doing progress meetings and change order review and all the details, doing site visits, making sure things are getting
Yeah, all
constructed
that.
as is. We have a construction manager who's more on site and will be overseeing the contractor and coordinating with the city and the architect, and also reviewing things like changes in plan or unforeseen conditions. And then we'll have city staff. Hopefully, we have a few city staff with construction experience. Our construction manager, for one, we currently have a vacant facility maintenance supervisor, but that position is also going to be critical to making sure that existing systems are operating while construction is underway, or adjusting things as needed. So it will take multiple city staff to oversee this project, as well as construction manager and the architectural team.
Yeah, that's one of my concerns about the timing of the two projects going forward. But so I'm knowing you, I'm assuming that the cost of that construction management is factored in here somewhere already.
It's not called out in the budget as a budget line, but it's certainly a cost of the project itself.
So it's not in here. And so
It would be assumed to be part of the
it
current
would be assumed to
funding
be
that we
part of it.
have.
That's what I meant. Okay. Which might explain part of why that went up in a way that I didn't understand a while ago. I guess my last question then is you said you got building permits at one point already, implies there were some older drawings, which is that before my time on the council, or did you
Do you
not
remember
get
what
that
year it
far?
was? We were full out design development and a budget. 4 years ago. How long have you been here? It was before the chief.
It was before your time.
That, okay, I don't need to know
2018
anymore.
Is when I got here and it was before that.
Before
Yes, and
that,
we
yeah,
were
and that's-
exploring
I got here
a
before
Sourcewell type construction contract rather than go out to bid. It was through the county GSA. And the pricing for that came in higher than our budget, and the decision was made at the time just to sort of hold things off and come back again. It was supposed to be done the next year, and then it just kept getting
Kept
kicked out,
getting-
kicked out, kicked out.
So that's how we got into this situation.
Yeah, so
I
I've
didn't know
called
that.
Greg
Thank you.
on, I don't know how many occasions today, we're back up again, we're ready, bring them on, and then, nope, we're gonna stop, and we're starting again.
Well, thank you for your patience with this. I think that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Councilman Searcy.
Quick question. So to what extent do we, when we're thinking through these types of projects, think about rentable space and creation of space such that we could potentially gain some revenues from basically renting out different sections of the building? I know that you had mentioned, kind of keeping that flex space on this first floor, but I don't know to what extent do we think about that when we're doing these types of projects?
I have not had that as a component of this project in thought. We've been really first focusing on just space needs, and could fill, as the chief indicated, we've got people double and tripling up in offices now. So we need far more space in the building than we have currently available. So we haven't really had that as part of this project. The time where I have seen the city discuss that was the community center process, and the rent and the recreation department was actively involved in that, as was the council. But it hasn't been a factor in what we've been looking at here.
Thank you.
Great. I just have two questions. One is, I know we talked about some of the headaches of doing two projects at once, and we're going out to bid at different times for a library project on this. And I don't know if you can answer this question, but could there be some cost savings if, in terms of potential construction companies that may do both projects?
Well, that is certainly a possibility, and it might be seen as an advantage on the part of construction companies. Greg had asked me a while back whether the city was envisioning the same contractor doing both projects, because they've been on this sort of different evolution. We didn't really think that wasn't an intentional piece of what we were looking to do. We weren't going to be able to advertise them at the same time. I think that, potentially that could attract a larger firm, which may have some, cost benefits associated with that. The one thing we've learned from our projects is that we are now going through an RFQ process before the RFP process. And I think that will be really helpful in terms of making sure that any of the contractors that bid for our project can meet basic qualifications and will be able to do the job. So it could very well be that the contractor who is bidding on the library will be aware of this project and may bid on it as well.
Great.
It would take, of course, a larger firm to be able to manage
do
these
both.
two things at once.
Yeah, I'm just thinking with inflation, everything else and other things that might be beneficial. The other thing is, in some of the bathrooms and things, was there any ever a consideration of having a shower put in?
We do have shower facilities in the police space in the back. We hadn't talked about it in the front.
Were you thinking for the mental health aspect?
Yeah.
Since this is more of the triage area,
Yeah.
normally showers wouldn't be here.
Okay.
That would be something that would be over at the Adventist site if we did that.
Okay. Thank you. Checking online, I just see Councilmember Siemens and don't see his hand up. Not seeing any other hands up, so I think we're done with this. And Ms. Braithwaite, if you want to remind us of next steps.
Sure. The next thing we would be bringing back for council's consideration is the award of a contract with our architectural firm so they can complete and continue the work that they've done on this project. We would be bidding as we have, or proposing as we have in the past, the riding on an existing either Anne Arundel County or Howard County contract. So we have a proposal from Bignell Watkinson Hasser for that. So we would have a ordinance establishing permission from the council to award a contract for them. And then that would be quickly followed by permission for the council for the construction management team. We would get a proposal from Arcadis.
I think I just lost you. So I thought you said awarding a contract to construct. No, you said awarding a contract to do what?
Construction management.
Construction
Basically, the
management. And
risk
before-
assessment, cost analysis,
Right,
and
okay.
constructability analysis
Got it.
that's being performed, as well as the other steps. You know,
Thank
you
you.
start there and you assume that they're going to stay on board, and they give pricing over a course of a defined scope of work. And I don't have a good sense of how long it will take for this to be bid ready. I don't know if you guys have a sense of how many weeks or months from now, if we were able to get a contract with you all in middle of May.
I think it won't be more than 3 months.
3 months. So yeah, within 3 months, we should be able to be going out to bid on this particular project. And then, of course, based on bid results, the council would see those and make a decision at that time as to whether to move forward.
So 3 months, assuming the other two steps go smoothly. Okay,
Mhm,
got it.
Sorry, Councilwoman Costick.
I was just wondering, in terms of kind of making sure before we take those next steps to do the contracts, is there any way to do an updated but rough estimate of the total costs? Before that, I'm hesitant to get too far down the line with the design if it turns out it's going to be $4 million and we just can't afford that.
I could talk to the architects after that. I'm not prepared to answer that. There's a cost associated with the cost estimate. And we would be assuming the construction management firm to do that as well. So I don't know whether it would be the best use of money to do that by so close together with the same firm. It would be an interesting comparison, but I'm not sure. But anyway, I'll get their advice and we can come back to you with that.
Thanks.
Answer.
And I think if we were to do that, I'd also want to know the lag time, just because like delaying again, and also just thinking about what happened with the library. Like we had some costs and then a month or so went by and then costs went up again. And so, yeah, if we do.
It's a
just think-
rapidly evolving situation,
Right.
so.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish it wasn't. All right, I'm not seeing any other.
Is there enough information here to do a construction estimate now? Or does the architect need to do? Yes,
They
okay,
got-
thank you.
I'm gonna say it again. I think those are all of the questions for this evening. Thank you for coming and walking through this with us. And I'll speak for myself that I hope we are moving forward with this project and we get to see it come through. All right, I will then say we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.